If you're into sci-fi, you've probably seen The Man from Earth pop up on recommendation lists as this early 2000s low-budget hidden gem that you have to watch if you like sci-fi. Despite its obscurity though, it holds a solid 7.8 rating on IMDb and 3.8 on Letterboxd. But when you scroll through the reviews, you get totally opposite opinions. Some of the people call it the best sci-fi film of the decade, praising it for its philosophical depth, while others say that it's the worst thing they've ever seen and genuinely wonder how this abomination even got that high of a rating. To be fair, The Man from Earth is a pretty unique film that's definitely not everyone's cup of tea. It's entirely dialogue based, no visual effects, no action scenes, just a group of people talking in a single room for an hour and a half. Now, while it seems to break every show don't tell rule in cinema, the story of how The Man from Earth came to be is actually pretty interesting and, in my opinion, essential to keep in mind when reviewing this movie. The film was written by Jerome Bixby, a well-regarded sci-fi writer known for his work on The Twilight Zone and the original Star Trek. He wrote the legendary Mirror Mirror episode, the one that basically spawned the entire concept of Dark AU fanfiction. Bixby started writing The Man from Earth way back in the early 1960s, but it wasn't until he was on his deathbed in 1998 that he finished it, dictating the final scenes to his son. After Jerome Bixby's death, his son, Emerson Bixby, wanted to honor his father's final work and set out to find the right person to bring it to the screen. He ended up collaborating with Richard Shankman, an experienced indie director known for his skill with tight budgets. And while The Man from Earth has an original and thought-provoking story, I can see why it was hard for Emerson Bixby to find a director for this project. It feels like it was written by someone more accustomed to literature than to screenwriting, which can make the adaptation to film a bit awkward. The movie begins with Professor John Oldman packing up his belongings, ready to head off to a new life. But his ex-colleagues from the university stop by for a surprise farewell visit. They start asking him questions about why he's leaving so abruptly, but he's been very cryptic about it, until he decides to test what happens if he tells them the truth. And the truth is that he's been alive for 14,000 years. And whenever people start noticing that he doesn't age, he moves on.
Let me get this straight. Now, we're not talking about reincarnation. You're not saying that you remember whatever the hell it would be 200 separate lifetimes, dying and being born again, yada yada.
One lifetime.
Some lifetime.
Now, it's a very fragile concept. There is so much that you can fuck up, making it feel silly or forced, but what I like is that even with such a wild premise, the writing holds up. The dialogue, the questions the colleagues ask, everything feels surprisingly grounded and real. Sure, the acting is a bit theatrical and it might feel quite telenovela at times, especially with the horrid mystery space.mp3 music they chose for the background, but I honestly got used to it as the film went on, and I'm willing to give it a break considering they shot the entire thing in just 8 days with only 1 week of rehearsals. In my opinion, David Lee Smith nails the wary, resigned attitude of a man who's been alive for 14,000 years. He's not trying to convince anyone or prove a point, because he knows that his story can't be proven.
Why are you telling us? I mean, we might leave here today. We'll go out there, tell everybody.
It would vanish in disbelief. Story that goes around the room. No credibility.
And the rest of the cast stands out too. Each character is distinct, and not only in how they react to John's claims, but also in appearance. That was my problem with Coherence. In Coherence, another single location film, all the actors looked like they picked the same character base, and honestly it was more confusing than whatever the fuck that comet was causing. Given The Man from Earth's single room setup, I was a bit skeptical about how it would stay visually interesting for an hour and a half, but the film adds some nice touches to keep it engaging. At one point, a moving company shows up to take out the furniture, forcing the characters to shift around and find new places to sit and stand. Plus, it's not the same group of people in every scene. Some characters leave, some come in, and we even get a few scenes outside where characters take a smoke break, offering a momentary breather from the intensity of the room and the dialogue. Then, as the story progresses, the daylight fades and the film starts leaning on practical lighting, which adds some great atmosphere. Now, many people point out that The Man from Earth feels more like a theater play than a movie, and honestly, I agree, and I don't see any problem with it. In fact, I would say that it's a missed opportunity that this screenplay was never adapted for the stage. The story and dialogue could have thrived in a theater setting, maybe even more so than on screen, because, let's be honest, the cinematography here is dog shit. Some shots are out of focus and the colors... At one point, I genuinely wondered if I missed something and the character turning green was like a plot point, like he was becoming an alien or something. Sure, there are a few memorable shots, but overall, it's not exactly what you would call a cinematographic masterpiece. I actually wish the director had leaned harder into this low-budget vibe and made it look intentional. Like, maybe throw in some handheld shots and add a few jump cuts. As it stands, it feels like this movie desperately tried to look classy, but just didn't have enough budget. But the budget that they had was still $200,000, which would be around like $300,000 in today's money. For a single location, dialogue-driven film with only 9 actors, all due respect, where did that money go? Because I know plenty of low-budget sci-fi films that have done more with similar budgets, adding complex cinematography, multiple locations, and even VFX. And yet, despite its lack of technical polish, The Man from Earth still gained a cult following, but in a pretty unconventional way. After its release, it went mostly unnoticed until someone uploaded it on a torrent site, where people started pirating it. And surprisingly, Richard Shankman was totally fine with it, and in fact, it inspired him to start a crowdfunding campaign for a sequel, The Man from Earth Holocene, which, well, let's just say it kind of proves that the magic of the first film came from Bixby's script. And that script really does explore some fascinating ideas. If someone had been alive for thousands of years, witnessing humanity's evolution, the rise and fall of civilizations, what kind of knowledge would they have? Would they be all-knowing? And the answer that Bixby gives us is...
Living 14,000 years didn't make me a genius. I got my biology degree at Oxford in 1840. So I'm a little behind the times. The same in other areas. I can't keep up with the new stuff that comes along. No one can. Not even in their specialty.
So much for the myth of the super-wise, all-knowing immortal.
I see your point, John. No matter how long a man lives, he can't be in advance of his times.
He can't know more than the best of the race knows.
If that. I mean, when the world learned it was round, you learned it.
I love that he resisted the temptation to make John some kind of superhuman, and that approach is refreshingly human. I understand why some might find the philosophical discussions boring, but to me they serve as the backdrop to a much deeper drama. This screenplay is a prime example of driving the story through dialogue. From the start, we, as viewers, aren't even sure if John's story is true, but we choose to believe him. Why? I haven't heard this take before, but to me, this movie is about the essence of science fiction itself. Bixby, a lifelong sci-fi writer who contributed to some of the most iconic works of the genre, encapsulates the wonder that sci-fi stirs in us, the desire to believe. Sci-fi lets us imagine the extraordinary, to hope and believe that theoretically the impossible might one day be possible. It's about glimpsing something grander, something that stretches us beyond ourselves and sets us against the scale of the universe. In my opinion, the lack of flashbacks and visual effects only strengthens the film's concept. It adds this necessary layer of ambiguity to John's story and plays subtle mind games with the viewer until the very end. There is a moment in the film when, after the characters seem to have tentatively accepted the idea that John might actually be 14,000 years old, he's asked a tricky question that throws everything into turmoil.
Did you ever meet any person from our religious history? A biblical figure?
In a way.
Who?
This moment creates a clash among the characters. Many critics have called this twist ridiculous and unnecessary, saying that it disrupts believability of the story, but I think that's exactly the point. It is supposed to disrupt the believability. Both John's colleagues and the audience seem willing to believe in fantastic stories only as long as they don't go too far, as long as they don't clash with their core beliefs. In a way, The Man from Earth feels like an ode to science fiction itself. It's fitting that Bixby finished this story at the end of his life. The movie has this deep philosophical tone, reflecting on mortality, human nature, and the essence of time. It reminds us why we're drawn to sci-fi, to believe the impossible. Sure, the cinematography is rough and the acting can be a bit unpolished, but there is something deeply comforting about this film. I would give this film 3.5 stars out of 5, and honestly, I would watch it again.